All right, we're going over 5.3 slope-intercept form, and we're doing the warm-up. So adding a positive and a negative, remember it's always a subtraction. So we get 4 minus 6 is 2, and we keep the negative sign because the 6 is bigger. Same thing happens for 2, negative 3 and 5, we subtract, it's going to be 2. Now this time it's going to stay positive as the 5 is bigger. For 3 we have negative 7 minus 7. These two are negative, so same sign we add. We're going to keep the sign. It's going to be negative 14.
Wait, how do you know when to add? It's like
And then for number 4 we have 2 minus negative 1. If we remember, this negative and this negative become a positive. So we're left with just adding 2 plus 1, which gives us 3. So by the end of this class, you should be able to find the slope by using the slope formula. We're going to see it later, but the slope, we're going to be referring to it as the letter M. So as you guys saw before in lesson 5.1, the slope was described as a constant rate of change of a line. And we saw how to find the slope of a line by using its graph. So there's also a formula you can use to find the slope of a line, which is usually represented by the letter M, just like I mentioned before. And to use this formula, you need the coordinates of 2 different points on the line. So the formula looks like this. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now, they're going to give you 2 points. 2 points. And then you're just going to be able to plug them in and solve for the M, which is the slope. So the slope formula in words is the slope of a line is the ratio of difference in y values to the difference in x values between any 2 different points on the line. The formula, like I showed you, they give you an x1, a y1, an x2, and a y2. And are any 2 different points on a line to the slope where the line is M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which is the point we did before. Now, in this example, they have if 2 comma negative 3 and 1 comma 4. So again, different points, we're good to go. Our 2 points on the line, the slope of the line is that. Now, I'm going to go over how they plugged it in. They chose these to be the x2 and the y2, and then this as the x1 and the y1. So if we follow that order, it should be 4 minus. Keep in mind that even though this is a negative 3, we're not going to get rid of the minus just yet. Let's write it out as 4 minus negative 3. And for the x's is 1 minus 2. Now, as we saw before, this negative and this negative are going to end up becoming a positive. So we're going to end up adding 4 plus 3, which is 7. And then 1 minus 2 is negative 1, which simplifies to negative 7. But I do want to make it clear, even if you have a minus negative, please don't change it until after you're written it down. That way you evade yourself a bit of a headache when you have to do it. So for this slide, they want us to find the slope of the line that contains 2 comma 5 and 8 comma 1. So they give us a formula, M equals y2 minus y1 and x2 minus x1. Use the slope formula and substitute 2 comma 5 for x1 and y1 and 8 comma 1 for x2 and y2. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to have 1 minus 5 and then 8 minus 2. 1 minus 5 is going to be 4, and it's going to be negative because the 5 is bigger. And 8 minus 2, it's going to be 6, which is going to simplify to negative 2 over 3, and that will be your slope. So they want us to find the slope of the line that contains the points negative 2 comma negative 2 and 7 comma negative 2. Now I'm just going to denominate these as x1 and y1, and then this other one is x2, y2. So following this formula and the points we chose, we're going to get negative 2 minus negative 2 over 7 minus negative 2. Now, as we know, this minus negative is going to become a positive in both cases. So it's going to be negative 2 plus 2 is just going to be 0. And then here we're going to get 9. Now, do you remember when I mentioned the last section, or 5.1, that 0 over a number, it's equal to 0, and that slope is 0. So that's a horizontal line that we're going to get if we were to graph it. If you by any chance would have gotten 0 at the bottom, so 9 over 0 by chance, that would have been an undefined slope, which would be a vertical line. So you can still get a number and a 0, or a 0 and a number, and it'll be fine. Now, I want you guys to notice something. I'm erasing the values that we chose. I'm going to choose now the bottom ones to be the y2 and x2. Sorry, the ones, y1 and x1. And the top ones to be x2 and y2. Now, the reason why I want to show you this is because as long as you are consistent with your point that you choose, it doesn't matter which one's 2 and which one's 1. Those numbers just mean like, hey, this is point number 2, and this is point number 1. So if we were to do it that way, we're going to get negative 2 minus negative 2. And then we're going to get negative 2 minus 7, which again, this becomes positive, so it's going to give us 0. And this becomes negative 9. Again, this simplifies to 0, which gives us a horizontal line. So we do get the same slope, but I just want you guys to notice that as long as you're consistent, it doesn't matter which coordinates you choose. This one, they're asking you to find the slope of the line that contains those 2 points. I'm going to write the formula in here so you guys can have it to refer back to. All right. So let's set these up. I'm going to call these, let's call them x1 and y1, and let's call these x2 and y2. So if we do that, we're going to get that the slope is negative 4 minus negative 7 over 6 minus 5. That minus negative becomes a positive. It's going to give us 3 over 1, which simplifies to 3. If you would have done it the other way, so you would have put negative 7 minus negative 4 over 5 minus 6. Again, this is going to simplify to negative 3 over negative 1, which the negative over a negative becomes a positive, so you still get the same slope. So it doesn't matter which one you chose to practice with, you should have gotten the same slope. So sometimes you're not given 2 points to use in the formula. You might have to choose 2 points from a graph or table. So in this case, they will give you a graph or a table in order for you to choose it. So in this case, the graph shows you a linear relationship and they want you to find the slope. In this section, they want you to find the slope using the formula. So in this case, since this section is talking about the formula, we're going to use it to solve for these. I'm going to call these points to be the 2's and these points to be the 1's. So that's just because I went that way, but you could have chosen it the other way. So 2 minus negative 2, and then 0 minus negative 2. It's going to simplify. So we end up with 4 over 2, which simplifies to 2. If you would have chosen it the other way, let me do it in red. So the 2 and this the 1. We would have gotten negative 2 minus 2 over negative 2 minus 0. We're left with negative 4 over negative 2, which again simplifies to 2. So we get the same answer. In the previous sections, though, you guys know how to do it with rise over run. So if we count 1, 2, 3, 4 up, and then we count 2 to the right, it's going to be 4 over 2. Using rise over run, which simplifies to 2. So that's 3 different ways that you can get the slope. You can check your work by flipping the numbers if you use the formula. You can use rise over run if it's not stated which way I would like you to find the slope. Now, most of the time, if you have a graph, I would tell you go ahead and do rise over run. But but sometimes the graphs are not perfect. So if you have the points, it doesn't hurt to check. Here the table shows a linear relationship and they want you to find the slope. Step 1, we choose any 2 points. I'm going to actually go ahead and choose this point and this point. It doesn't really matter. They don't have to be next to each other. So I'm going to write it down, -2, 5 and -1, 3. So after I choose those points, we use the slope formula to figure it out. So if I'm going to call these the 1s and these the 2s, I'm going to do 5 minus 3, -1 minus -2. It's going to become a positive, so I'm left with 2 over 1, which simplifies to 2. Now, you could have chosen different points. Let's say I'm going to choose this far of one. So I'm going to get 0, 1 and 1, -1. Plug them into the formula. Again, I'm going to choose this to be my 2s and these to be my 1s. Plug it into the formula would be 1 minus -1 over 0 minus 1. We're left with 2 over -1. We actually are left with -2. I just caught myself. I made a mistake in the first one, guys. I'm sorry. I flipped the numbers in accident. I said my 2s were my -2 and 5. So it would actually be -2 minus -1, which leaves me with -1, which leaves me with a -2. So you see, even if you do make a mistake and you plug in a different set of points, you would be able to tell, hey, they don't match. So that's okay. Mistakes happen. I just made one. You could have chosen any points and they should match up. If they don't, that means there's a mistake somewhere. Okay, so for the graph shows a linear relationship, they want us to find the slope. I'm going to call these my 2s and these my 1s to use the formula. So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So it would be 6 minus 4, 8 minus 4. So I'm left with 2 over 4, which simplifies to a half. Now, if you guys for some reason chose these to be your 2s and these to be your 1s, I'll plug it in as well. So it would be 4 minus 6 and then 4 minus 8. That's going to give us -2 over -4, which simplifies to positive a half since the top and the bottom are negative. We got the same thing. Now, if by any chance you wanted to also check with the right over run, we rose 2. And then, sorry, it looks like a 3. We rose 2. And then run 1, 2, 3, 4. Which simplifies again to a half. So this is just multiple ways of getting the same answer. And none of them are wrong. It just depends on the instructions that you get on your quiz and your test. All right. So the graph shows the linear relationship and they want us to find the slope. Now I'm going to choose these to be my 2 and this to be my 1. So m equals -2 minus 4, and then 0 minus -2. This is going to become positive, so -6 over 2 gives me -3. If you would have chosen it the other way, this would have been 2 and this would have been 1. That's fine. We're going to get 4 minus -2, and then -2 minus 0. This is going to simplify to 6 over -2, which simplifies again to -3. If you actually do it both ways, you can actually check your work. And since they both match, we know we did a good job. Similarly, if you wanted to check with rise over run, we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It goes down 6. And it ran 2 to the right, so 2 positive, simplifies to -3. If you would have done rise over run the other way, we rose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So positive 6. And we ran to the left 2. So -2, again, simplifies to -3. So you're able to get the same answer 4 different ways. Or, well, 2 of those ways are repeated of each other, but we're going the opposite direction, which works just fine. It's a great way of checking. That way you know if you had the answer right or not when you take the quiz or test. All right, so for this one, I'm just going to choose, let's say this point right here. and this point right here, just to show that they don't have to be next to each other. So I'm going to write 0, 1, just so I have them written down, and 5, 11, just to make sure I put them in the right place. I'm going to choose this to be my 2's and these to be my 1's. So when I do that, I'm going to get m equals, the 2's go first, so 11 minus 1, and then 5 minus 0. I'm left with 10 over 5, which simplifies to 2. Awesome. If you would have chosen it the other way, I'm just going to write it in as an example. 1 minus 11 and 0 minus 5. We're left with negative 10 over negative 5, which simplifies again to positive 2. Now, I wanted to show you that you can use whatever numbers, and that's fine. But I would always recommend you guys choosing simpler numbers. The simpler, the better. So that, like the ones that put in red. So if I use 0, 1 and 2, 5, that makes it so much easier because they are a lot smaller numbers. So when I do that, I'm going to choose these to be the 2's and these to be the 1's. 5 minus 1 and then 2 minus 0. I'm left with 4 over 2, which simplifies again to 2. So they all match all the time, which is great. That's exactly what we want. Just, it's easier to do 5 minus 1 and 2 minus 0 than it is to do 11 minus 1 or 13 minus 5. Just the easier numbers you pick, the easier the problem will be for you. But if you don't and you choose the hard numbers, that's fine too. As you saw, we get the same exact thing. Alright, so just as a reminder, this is the formula we're going to be using. And again, we're just going to pick 2 points. Doesn't matter which ones. I'm just going to choose these 2. I'm going to write them down. 0, 0, and negative 2, 3. I'm going to choose these to be my 2's and this to be my 1's. When I do that, I end up with m equals 3 minus 0, negative 2 minus 0. That's going to give me 3 over negative 2, and that is your slope. If you happen to have done it backwards, it would be 0 minus 3 and then 0 minus negative 2. That minus negative is going to become a positive, and you're left with negative 3 over 2. So same slope. If you chose different numbers, I'll do, say these 2 numbers because you like them better. I'm going to write them down, 2, negative 3 and 4, negative 6. Let's say this is my 2's and this is my 1's. It would be negative 6 minus negative 3 over 4 minus 2. This is going to become a positive. So negative 6 plus 3 is negative 3. And then 4 minus 2 is 2. If you happen to have done it the other way, let's say this is your 2's and these is your 1's, you're left with negative 3 minus negative 6 over 2 minus 4. It's going to simplify it to negative 3 plus 6. It is positive 3. And then 2 minus 4 is negative 2. So it doesn't matter which point you pick again. You're still going to get the exact same answer no matter what you picked. I'm going to do other points. I'm going to erase the space right here so I can have a space. I'm going to use the points negative 2, 3 and 2, 3. Let's write the point in as negative 2, 3 and then 2, negative 3. Let's say this is my 2 and this is my 1's. We're going to do 3 minus negative 3 over negative 2 minus 2. This is going to simplify to a positive, so we're going to end up adding 3 plus 3 becomes 6. And negative 2 minus 2 ends up being negative 4, which simplifies later to 3 over negative 2. So the same thing we had before, we just have to simplify it. So if you do it the other way, you actually end up with negative 3 minus 3 over 2 minus negative 2. So this bottom one becomes a positive. So end up negative 3 plus negative 3 is negative 6. And then 2 plus 2 is 4. And again, you simplify it by 2, so you end up with negative 3 over 2. So remember that slope is the rate of change in the real world problem. So finding the slope can give you information about how quantity is changing. So if you have a graph, let's say this is time passing in the speed of a car. It can give you how fast a car was going over time. So for example, we have this application. The graph shows the average electricity cost in dollars for operating a refrigerator for several months. They want us to find the slope of the line, then tell what the slope represents, and they want us to use the slope formula. Now in this case, they give us 2 points, 2, -12, and 212 and 424, and they chose the 12s and the 212 to be the 2s, and this to be the 1s, and they plugged them in right here. So 12 minus 24 and then 2 minus 4. They end up with -12 over -2. And if we notice, if we were to do rise over run, this is not going perfectly by ones. So you have to be careful when you're counting, okay? So that's why sometimes it's better to do the formula, because these numbers right here are not going by ones. So you have to be conscious of that. Now, from the previous slide, it says to tell what the slope represents. In this situation, y represents the cost of electricity and x represents time. So in this case, remember the slope is always a change in y. So y2 minus y1, change in y, over x2 minus x1, change in x. So if the y is the cost of electricity, the slope would represent the change in the cost of electricity, and then since the x is the time, it would be the change in time. So in the units of dollars and months, as we see in the last slide of the graph. So a slope of 6 means the cost of running the refrigerator is at a rate of $6 per month. Does that make? So here the graph shows the height of a plant over a period of days, and they want us to find the slope of the line, then tell what the slope represents using the slope formula. Again, in this case, they did it for us. They chose the 2's from the graph to be the 10 and the 30, and then they chose the 50 and the 20s to be the 1's. They plugged them in, the y in the top, the x in the bottom, and they end up with a half. Keep in mind how the x is right here is times, and then the height is the y. So this is representing how tall this plant gets over a period of time. So in this step, they tell what the slope represents. Again, since the height of the plant is the y and the x represents time, it would be the change in the height over the change in time, which is what I was saying about how it is based on how tall this plant gets over time. Now, if you notice on the last slide, the graph had a centimeter mark on it. So it would be centimeters, so the height of changes in centimeters over the days. If the slope was a half, that means the plant grows half a centimeter per day, every 2 days, sorry. So it's a half centimeter. Remember, this is the centimeter, so it's 1 centimeter for every 2 days, right? That's what it means. So this half, yes, it's a fraction. It's 0.5. It's 0.5 per every 2 days. So this slide I am adding to show you guys something. You guys have seen the equation y equals mx plus b, and we know the m is the slope. Now we just learned this, and we'll be using the slope formula. The slope formula, I'm just gonna write it down. This is a bit of a summary to what your classwork is for the rest of the class. That's the formula, so that's how you find the slope. As well as this b, we haven't really talked about it, but I do want to mention that this b is the y-intercept of the graph. So if you have a graph that looks like this point right here at the y-axis is your y-intercept. Your y-intercept point is always going to be 0, either a positive or a negative number. That's always going to be the case. And when written in this form, it's always going to be the number alone on the right.